Well, it might be easy to get excited about Cowboy baseball. It is not easy to get excited about the potential donor fallout from the Board of Regents fiasco. However, the backfield battle entering the spring is something that all of us can rally around and get pumped up for.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at All Day O State. Today, we're just going to roll right into this, because what seemingly will be the biggest conversation for any school in the country, unless you have a tried and true proven winner returning at quarterback, is always going to be that battle. Well, right next to that, what literally goes hand in hand is the battle that is going to be happening in Stillwater from a tailback perspective. Now, we've seen some of these different depth charts come out, and synonymously, they seem to be hinting at Rodney Fields taking over as RB1 for Oklahoma State. And although I do not completely disagree with that assessment, I want to focus on what it's going to look like when we enter the spring. Because when you enter the spring with a virtually entirely new roster, it is going to be difficult to have a distinguishment between who's going to be first string and who's going to be fourth string. As it pertains to these two particular positions, though, I feel like it is a little bit easier for us to diagnose this. Part of this is going to be the fact that Mike Gundy does have a propensity to lean on some of the senior leadership. I think it's very clear that that is not going to be the case this year, or at least not as it typically has been in Mike Gundy's career. Defensively, Todd Grantham being the head coach on defense would allow a lot of that to kind of shake down the most natural way physically possible, which is all on competition. But even then, there's going to be have some guys that are going to start as number one on the depth chart, number two on the depth chart, number three on the depth chart, so on and so forth. So the way that I see the depth chart shaking out after spring, after fall, might be entirely different than entering spring. But nonetheless, you have to have at least a little bit of leadership capabilities to assume the number one role. And I think a lot of that on the offensive side of the ball is typically going to be catered to the quarterback. And we have a lot of viable candidates. And Garret Rangel, who typically would be the tried and true Mike Gundy, third year, fourth year in the system, understands the playbook, understands the culture, has a very good understanding and camaraderie with the locker room, has good leadership capabilities. So all of that typically would indicate that Garret Rangel starts spring ball as QB1. But you also have Maealiuaki Smith, who came in at the latter half of the season last year, had a W under his belt, had a couple games where he showed that he could definitely get it done at this level in this conference and potentially make some things happen. He was a little bit more athletic than I think we'd initially thought coming out of high school, the Juniper Sierra area. So, of course, you have Garret Rangel, who has multiple years in the system now, who was a former four-star from ESPN and 247 coming to Oklahoma State. Then you have Maealiuaki Smith coming from Juniper Sierra, who shattered a lot of the biggest Tom Brady records that were ever put up at that school, and he's top three still all time in multiple categories. Then you have Mr. Nebraska and Zane Flores. And I think a lot of people, just because we haven't seen what Zane could do on the field yet, are extremely intrigued by the capabilities this young man brings. When we're talking about the development from the Rob Glass nutrition system, the Body by Glass, Zane Flores was really the guy who walked in with a lot of that already at his disposal. So he wasn't going to need to put on 15 to 20 pounds before he could be a viable candidate to be a starter, much like Garret Rangel. Right? Garret Rangel walked in the building at 180, 185 pounds, and he has had to work his way up to getting to 212, 215, 216. Now, some of that will change throughout the course of the offseason, and in the season, the weight gain will be a little bit different. But Zane Flores didn't need all of that. And then you also have to enter the picture Hauss Hejny. Hauss Hejny is the speed freak with a certified 10.63. He was clocked at 21.7 miles an hour last season, but he also has over 5,000 yards passing at his disposal. And he was such an important piece athletically to get on the field for TCU that he was even implemented during Josh Hoover's remarkable football season this previous year. So I think that Mike Gundy will have a little bit of a hand in this offensively, maybe not so much on the defensive side of the ball, but him and Doug Meacham go back a long ways. And I do know there's some familiarity with Garret Rangel in the recruiting process from not only Doug Meacham, but also Kevin Johns. So I do firmly believe that just the implementation of how things typically have been, the senior leadership that Garret Rangel provides, will allow him to enter spring ball as QB1. Now, this isn't going to be your traditional QB1 style of role either. I think there's going to be reps that are divided up somewhat evenly. But if somebody's going to roll out there as QB1 day one in the spring, it should be Garret Rangel. And he should have the opportunity to lose that job. But nonetheless, you saw what Maealiuaki Smith was able to provide last season. You have Mr. Nebraska himself and Zane Flores, who's now 6'4", darn near 220 pounds. That's going to be almost impossible to keep off the field. The same can be said for Hauss Hejny because of what he was able to do at TCU. So how it enters spring and how the spring ends is going to be worth the weight in gold, or worth every millisecond of the watch, because the snaps are going to be divided up somewhat evenly. But even with that, I would imagine that we roll out day one of spring with Garret Rangel as QB1, Maealiuaki Smith as QB2, Zane Flores as QB3, and Hauss Hejny's QB4. But again, I think that the snaps are going to be so even that there's not really going to be a pure distinguishment of who's QB1 and who is QB4. But you have to roll out somebody. You have to roll out some semblance of a starting unit. There has to be a quarterback that's going to go out there and take the very first snap of spring. And to me, that should be Garret Rangel. He's been here long enough. He's been through the Mike Gundy and the Rob Glass system that even if there is a massive shift in what offense we're going to be able to run, his senior leadership in the locker room should carry a lot of weight, because we saw it in the BYU game last year. The O-lineman, the D-lineman, the entire team, the sidelines was jumping up and down for Garret Rangel. So he does have a very good pulse in that locker room from a leadership standpoint. I think that in and of itself will allow him to take the very first snap of spring as QB1. But again, his leash is going to be very short. They want the best players to play all across the board. So if he starts day one as QB1 and he's already thrown picks, then he'll be QB1 for one day. I think that's basically how I see it shaking out. Likewise, I think it's pretty comparable for the running back position as well. Is Rodney Fields going to end up being a potential Kendall Hunter, Justice Hill, Tyreek Hill level of guy in Stillwater America? Yeah, it's very, very possible. I think we could lean towards even probable. But Trent Howland is going to be somebody that is trusted, because Trent Howland, if we recall, was kind of teetering on the ropes of, am I going to enter the transfer portal? And it seemed as though he was leaning that route. I did get to have a couple conversations with him during that time frame. Then he had a meeting with the new incoming staff, or at least with Meacham. And the meeting went absolutely remarkable, not only with the outgoing staff, with the incoming staff. There was an emphasis for Trent Howland on how we're going to be able to utilize your assets that you bring to the fold at Oklahoma State. Does that mean we're going to have a running back 1A, 1B style situation? I think that's exactly what it's going to equal. You're going to have the Thunder package guy. You're going to have the Lightning package guy. So if nothing else, Trent Howland should likely begin the season as your tried and true traditional RB1. But that is also going to be fairly indicative of Rodney Fields being the quintessential third down running back. So all third downs, he's going to be out there because he can be implemented into the pass protection and also into the route scheme as well. So I think it'll start off as Trent Howland, Rodney Fields. I think Kalib Hicks is obviously going to be able to slide in here. The development of Jaden Hendricks is going to be absolutely phenomenal to watch, but also we have to take into consideration Sesi Vialahi is back, the Jalen Warren style back. So he likely, I would imagine, would be number 3. Kalib Hicks would be number 4, and Jaden Hendricks would be next in line. That's how I see the beginning of the spring. Who's going to be the quarterback to hand it off to the first running back? I feel like that's going to be Garret Rangel to Trent Howland. How that develops throughout the course of the spring and into the fall, that is going to be what we're all anticipating. That's going to be what we're watching for, waiting for, because the anticipation is already pretty high. And I think it's important for those mainstays to get some of the senior leadership abilities early on to see who's going to gravitate towards them or who's going to gravitate towards some of the newer guys. because that also should play a hand in who's going to be the guys that are rolling out in game one. Whether you're rolling out in game one or not, you need to make sure that you're trying to do it in style. And here towards the end of the season, or the beginning of the season, after all of the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little bit of TLC, a little bit of a makeover. You'll always be able to find decluttering is very refreshing to your space, and it helps you get your space back to it. You get in a routine. Whether you're just tidying up, clearing out everything, or you want to give your new space a new look to start the new year, Wayfair has everything you need, and it's all within your budget. If you're currently looking for a huge selection to be implemented into your living situation, Wayfair is going to make it easiest for you to find the right pieces to fit your style and budget. The best part, the free and hassle delivery that you have gives you the peace of mind, even if it's on larger items, that it's going to get there and be squared away for you to put into your home. Wayfair's site is so simple to navigate that you're going to find everything you need in no time. There's going to be something for every style in every home, no matter what your space or your budget is. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals with endless inspiration for every single space. Whether you're into a certain decor style or you're just wanting to mix it up or have a mix and match, Wayfair can help you deliver. Wayfair is going to help you do this in a very good time frame as well, so there's not a massive crunch. Give your home the refresh that it needs with Wayfair. Head on over to wayfair.com right now. That is Wayfair, WAYFAIR.com. That is Wayfair. Get with a Wayfair today because it is for every style in every home. And Wayfair is the right ticket for you. All right, so now we get to jump in here to some of the things that have been kind of coming down the pipeline in regards to some of the fallout from Dr. Kayse Shrum, the Board of Regents, the pushing out, and even if there is a misappropriation of funds to some degree, we all know, as we've seen, from a political perspective, if she was liked, they'd move it around, mush it around, it'd be no big deal. If she was doing millions of things that were positive and they liked them and they liked her for them, and she was willing to push some of the agendas that they needed to kind of be pushed, none of this would be happening or taking place. So this is a smokescreen. This seems pretty evident that it's a smokescreen, even if some of it were to come out that Dr. Kayse Shrum did do something that was slightly nefarious. I don't particularly buy it, especially if you look back at what it possibly stems from, some of the own Boone money and the Boone money being gone, and somebody want to kind of fill that vacuum. And now you're hearing potentially that Governor Stitt has some hand in this or had some hand in the Board of Regents, the guys that were appointed. And you've got the big old Dorkosaurus Rex himself, Mr. Harrell, hanging out at Galgrab Arena for basketball. This whole thing smells fishy. It seems stinky. And now we're hearing potential donors that have pulled out. Now, the potential here is not necessarily that people are deciding not to donate to Oklahoma State. That seems to be pretty open from some of these donors in the circles that they run in. What is not seemingly nailed down is the amount. Now, there's been stuff come out that some donors are not going to give $100 million and some donors are not going to give $50 million. I don't know if I believe in the figures, because if there was another Boone Pickens that had $100 million to give to Oklahoma State, I think we would know about it, and I think everybody and their mom would know who that individual is. So the idea that there's a donor that's going to pull $100 million, to me, that seems pretty ridiculous, because, again, if there was somebody out there with Boone-level money, since there seems to be a vacuum to fill the Boone void, that individual, whomever it was, that has the ability to give over $100 million would fill that vacuum, and he would be the new Boone, and we would probably know about it. So I don't necessarily buy it. Now, donors pulling out $50 million, $20 million, $10 million, that type of thing does make sense. And even if you don't necessarily buy some of the rumors that are being floated about, let's view it from a common sense perspective. There's got to be people that have been donating money or have been preparing to donate money, partially because of the Chad Weiberg and Dr. Kayse Shrum being able to pull some things together to make some things happen. These were still the same people that hired J.C. Hoyt. And J.C. Hoyt has said, countless remarkable things about Dr. Kayse Shrum. So if there's a women's basketball NIL individual, that are likely tied in with not only J.C. Hoyt, but Dr. Kayse Shrum. So it only makes sense that some of those people would not be happy about how this is going. And that could potentially hurt J.C. Hoyt's future as an Oklahoma State Cowgirl, because she might feel some kind of way about how this whole thing transpired, or she might be now losing out on some NIL dollar bills because of the love that the student athletes and the students had for Dr. Kayse Shrum. From a football perspective, yeah, Mike Gundy didn't have a good year. Oklahoma State had a horrendous year, but all of the laziness, all of the complacency, all of the overarching issues are gone. Whether you like the way that Dr. Kayse Shrum and Chad Weiberg handled this and their disagreements with the Board of Regents, the fact of the matter is, Mike Gundy needs to go out a winner. That's what's best for Oklahoma State. And from a national perspective as well, you do want to see your guy that has been here forever and a day, that has almost single-handedly, not really, but almost gotten Oklahoma State up to the level that it is right now. He fired everybody, which we all know historically that's not something he's comfortable with. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't like to do that. Yet he did it. It doesn't matter if he was pushed to do it. He did it. And now we have a lot more excitement in Stillwater, Oklahoma about the upcoming football season because of the Doug Meachams and the Todd Granthams and the Cap Dedes and the Aaron H's of the world, the Cooper Bassett's, the Andrew Mitchells. All of this has done a lot to build the excitement for Oklahoma State fans in particular. Now, of course, give a spring game. All right, let's hit this marketability and relaunch the NIL to the max, especially with this happening. Whether it's football, basketball, women's basketball, men's basketball, track, cross country, it doesn't matter. There are going to be people that have buku dollar bills that like the fact that Dr. Kayse Shrum and Chad Weiberg hired J.C. Hoyt, hired Steve Lutz, hired David Taylor. Matter of fact, we're getting dollar bills from people that are an individual that didn't even go to Oklahoma State on behalf of the state of Oklahoma for wrestling, just to kind of help get the name of wrestling built up even more in Oklahoma, where the sport of wrestling has always been absolutely massive. So even if the figures are not 100% accurate, there's got to be something to this. There's undoubtedly going to be some donors that do not like the way this was done, that do not like the railroading that happened with Dr. Kayse Shrum, that do not like the hand fighting over potential naming this and not naming that. And this guy doesn't donate, but he has his fingers all over stuff because he's got buddies that donate or buddies that are in the Board of Regents. This is just, it's become a massive black eye. I don't know another way to say it. And there's likely going to be some fallout from this that we're not going to enjoy. And I think you're already seeing that because donors pulling money because of how this was handled, it's happening. Now it's the amount of money that seems to be a little bit of a question, because again, if there was another Boone that had Boone level money, I think we would know about it. But even some of the sinners, Obrate and Greenwoods and some of those other things that have been put up somewhat recently, those donors are up there in age or no longer hanging out down here with us. They're up there kicking it with Boone. This whole thing has been handled absolutely preposterous. So the only way that the Board of Regents can get all of the massive pieces of egg off of their face at this point in time is to find a way to assure, and I know they physically can't come out and do it, but have some of their peoples come out and make proclamations that we're not going to have any issues with dollar bills. That yes, we lost some donors over this, but it's okay because we have these donors that are willing to step up X amount of dollar bills. To me, that's the only way we save face here, because some donors are absolutely pulling out over the way this was handled. Now, is it massive donors? Who knows? If it was, I think we might have a decent understanding of who those massive donors would be. But nonetheless, whether it's 2 donors, 10 donors, 50 donors, the fact that we have people bowing out over this while Oklahoma State is sitting silent and the Board of Regents individuals are sitting silent and we're not really hearing anything, to me, it just adds the stench to this whole thing even higher. I don't like it. It stinks to high heavens. What doesn't stink to high heavens, thankfully, is Cowboy basketball, Cowgirl basketball, and we've got baseball coming up around the way and top 20 ranking. Congratulations to the Cowgirls on an absolutely dismantling of number 12 ranked Kansas State Lady Wildcats, who came into the game at 22-2. Now the Cowgirls moved to 19-4 overall, 9-3 in the Big 12. We did crack the top 20, and we would be top 15 if we didn't have the embarrassing losses to KU and Houston. We had an embarrassing loss earlier in the year. Obviously, you can kind of get by that one a little bit easier, but shout out to the Cowgirls who have now made this race for first place in the Big 12, worth everybody's eyeballs. Anna Gradasi drills a career high, 8 3-pointers to go alongside 24 points. Stayla Hurd chips in another double-double as the Cowgirls absolutely get it done. This was huge. Now we jump into the top 20. This is the timing where we've had difficulties after we've had big wins and we've gotten ranked. The next games are typically where we've gone a little downward. So it'll be good to see the Cowgirls continue this trend and keep on winning. As the Cowboys also found a way to get into the winner's circle, the Cowgirls get to take on Arizona. The Cowboys took down Arizona State 86-73. We had 6 players getting double digits, which was actually pretty remarkable and surprising to see all at the same time. This was an Arizona State squad that was pretty down on their luck. They had a lot of players out, so it was a game that we needed to win. It was a game that we should have won, so it was nice that we absolutely found a way to do that. Now we shift gears here because we got to get prepared for baseball season. We talked about how we had 3 freshmen that were in the top 75 freshmen in the country. We had top 50. We had 3 sophomores or juniors in the top 50. We had 3 graduating guys going out in the top 50. Now we're preseason number 1 in the Big 12, followed by Arizona, TCU, West Virginia, Texas Tech, Arizona State, UCF, Kansas State, KU, Cincinnati, Houston, Utah, Baylor, BYU. And the beauty of the Big 12 is we've noticed across football and every other sport that teams at the bottom can find ways to jump up and get teams at the top. I expect baseball to be somewhat reminiscent of that. In the all Big 12 preseason team, Oklahoma State had multiple individuals lead the way with 4. First baseman, Colin Brueggemann. Third baseman, Aiden Miola. Big-time pitcher and Okie, Gabe Davis, followed by the big dude who knows how to get it done, Nolan Schubert. First base, clean up. And then you have Big Briggy being a DH and a little bit of a jack of all trades here. Nolan Schubert, not only can he man the first base side, but he can also garner the Player of the Year in the preseason awards. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, so we are going to highlight baseball more, and we're going to talk about some of the players that we have coming over because I think somebody like Mario Pesca is obviously a massive story. But this schedule is murderer's row. We start the season with top 20 Clemson. Then we have Louisville, top 20 Texas. Then you have top 10, top 5 Tennessee, number 1 in the country, Texas A&M, top 10 Mississippi State. At Dallas Baptist is a top 25 team. West Virginia made super regionals last year. And then you got to go on the road to Utah before you even get to the back half of the schedule. We're going to kind of focus quite a bit more here on baseball, but we want to give it its proper time frame. And this is a little bit quick here. But I did want to kind of point out the baseball schedule. It is murderer's row. So if you're talking about the RPI, strength of schedule things at the end of the season, this is going to be absolute insanity. There's so many opportunities for Cowboy baseball to not only win a Big 12 title after winning the Big 12 tournament championship this previous season. The rest of it didn't really go as we'd anticipated or hoped that it would have. So we find ourselves now in a precarious situation, but also the ability to kind of be the figurehead of the new Big 12. There is going to be some competitors. It would be nice to see Arizona State get back up there. KU has the preseason pitcher of the year, so they'll be interesting to watch. Kansas State made super regionals. UCF made a good run in the postseason. So the Big 12 is going to be a little bit of an issue, but our schedule is going to set us up. And even if we're even remotely in the under 30 wins range, the schedule will be enough to kind of catapult us over the top. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen. You're Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Like it if you like the daggone thing. Dislike if you don't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast people out there. You're the bricks, the bread, the butter, the fountain, the fondue. Funny stuff, funky stuff. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. Later, taters.